X and 4's relationship was just friends. They sometimes got into fights or constantly yelled to get their way, but it would always end with a "I'm sorry" or "I was wrong," and sometimes even "Will you forgive me?" But along with words there also were hugs. Everything was platonic. Or, X thought it was. X noticed something over the month. 4 would always be sweaty in the morning. Or he would ignore X for quite a while until he finally gave in. X was always nervous when 4 spoke up to him, but now 4 was dead silent. X wondered if it had to do with 4's sleep. Maybe he had nightmares. But he never knew since, well, X always slept before him. X wandered off into his room and hopped to bed. 4 was in the living room planning of the next episodes coming during the hiatus. X hopped onto his bed like any other day. A normal day. X dozed off over time. Fuck. X instantly opened his eyes. He turned around to see 4 gripping his bed sheets. 4 bucked his hips. X quickly turned around as he noticed what was happening. 4 was having a wet dream, and to X's surprise, 4's uneasy breathing turned him on. X took a peek at 4 again. 4 was breathing heavily. X was incredibly horny at this point. X gave up. He walked up to 4. 4 looked like a mess. 4 was panting loudly. His bed covers were full and exposing his body. 4 was sweating like crazy due to his movement. All of this, and they stared at each other for a very long time. X, am I still in my dream? 4 asked. X shook his head. 4 grunted slightly. All this for a dream, X thought to himself. X's face was a tangerine at this point. X carefully set himself on top of 4. This was the great time that 4 woke up. X breathed in sharply. They stared at each other for a very long time. X, am I still in my dream? 4 asked. X shook his head. 4 grunted slightly. 4, do you need help with your situation? X asked. For a second 4 hesitated but thought for a moment. After a few seconds, 4 nodded his head. X looked at the spot where supposedly his dick was. X rubbed that spot to earn a moan. X was incredibly horny. He continued to rub that one spot until a dick appeared in place. 4 moaned loudly and continued panting loudly. X rubbed 4's dick while 4 was sustaining the urge to make any noise at all. 4 covered his mouth. His face turned a hue of dark purple while X was solving this situation. X's hands moved slowly at a rate. X, move faster. 4 grumbled. 4 clenched the bedsheets. X's hands moved faster. X deeply concentrated on 4's emotions. 4 covered his mouth again. He let out a shaky moan. X never knew 4 was such a bottom. 4's pupils rolled over his half-lidded eyes. 4 was shaking as waves of pleasure came to him. X knew the fact that 4 was enjoying the moment of pure bliss. X didn't say a word. Liquid spurted out of 4's member. 4 whined loudly. He looked over X and hugged him. X pulled the covers over them both. Thank you, 4 said softly while squeezing X's back. X smiled and quietly said, you owe me. 4 kissed X's face softly. X was known to be the submissive one in the relationship with 4. 4 thought he was the dominant one in the relationship. After episode 12, X was fed up. They started out just fine. Why did it have to turn out horrible? As 4 corrected X while they switched bodies doing cake at steak. X had enough. But the world was watching. The show had to go on. Once 4 and X reached their house, 4 grabbed the papers from Exit and began working on them. X fell on the couch and fell asleep. He woke up to see an angry and upset 4. 4 completed his work. He walked over to his room and sighed. X followed him and sat down with 4. 4 saw X and turned away from him. This was X's last straw. X thought. 4 was looking for a stress relief. Why not give him it? X turned around 4 and pinned him to the bed. 4 let out a grunt and gave X a look of pure annoyance. X, what do you need? 4 said. X cupped 4's face and cooed at the taller host. 4. I know all the trouble you went through. I know you need a stress reliever. 4 scoffed. Since when do you know what I want? X smiled at 4's resistance. He grabbed 4's hands and held them both. From the moment I saw you today. X slammed his lips onto 4's. Nsfw quickly grunted. X allowed his tongue inside 4's mouth and explored around before biting 4's bottom lip and releasing. 4 panted loudly. X pulled him in for another kiss. 4 allowed this. He didn't stop the smaller co-host. He couldn't really do anything. X released with a trail of saliva and squeezed 4's face. X then bit harshly into 4's neck. 4 screamed loudly, then being followed by 4 moaning loudly. X grabbed 4's hands and held them under his head. X then continued creating purple hickories on 4's neck. 4 struggled to get X's grasp off him. 4's neck was extremely sensitive. X stopped and started licking and nipping the hickories before he pulled up 4's shirt and started suckling 4's nipples. 4 looked down at X doing this. He was feeling so much pleasure as he watched X doing all of this to him. 4 struggled to keep himself quiet. X trailed down from 4's nipples and nipped his stomach. X wanted 4 to remember this bliss. X pulled down 4's pants and boxers. 4 panted loudly as X traced his V-line with his fingers. He then pushed 4's member into his mouth. His tongue wrapped around it and he started bobbing his head up and down. 4 gasped loudly and covered his mouth. 4 used his free hand to pet X's head. X knew 4 was getting to his climax. He deep-throated 4's dick until he was left with sticky white on his face and in his mouth. 4 sighed out of pleasure. X looked at 4 to see a sickly sweet smile form on his face. X hugged 4 and kissed his cheek. They were both purely satisfied. X, "You're such a good stress reliever," 4 said while he yawned. X was happy that 4 was back. So happy that he decided that 4 needed a little welcome back present. And maybe X needed a bit of a present himself. X walked into the bedroom that he shared with 4 and saw him laying on the bed. X went over to where 4 was laying and straddled himself over 4. X swore he could see a hint of purple on 4's face as he adjusted himself on top of him. X, "What do you need?" 4 stated. X took 4's hands and placed them behind his head. 4, "I was waiting for so long for you to come back. I need you," X said blankly. A smile slowly formed on his face. X looked at 4's face. 4 wanted this. If not, then something would be done. 4 missed X as much as he did. X leaned in and slowly kissed 4's lips. MMMNH. 4 let out a small grumble as they continued. X bit the bottom of 4's lip and allowed his tongue inside 4's mouth. NNNMM. 4 grunted. X released his lips from 4's and suddenly tackled 4's neck. 4 gasped and struggled against X's grip to cover his mouth and keep himself silent. X hummed in delight when he heard a grunt come out from 4's mouth. X bit into 4's neck, creating small hickeys. X then ripped open 4's shirt and began to nip and suck on 4's nipples. 4 quivered as his nipples quickly hardened at the stimulation. X softly bit and licked at them, making small bite marks and leaving saliva all over them. X continued to create a trail of hickeys all over 4's body from his neck to his barely visible V-line. X took 4's dark blue pants and light blue boxers off. 4 was sopping wet. X spread 4's legs wide open and began creating hickeys on the inside of 4's thighs. 4 covered his mouth and let out a muffled groan. X then began to remove his own shorts and boxers to reveal his shaft. 4 looked at X and began squirming. 4 needed X inside him so badly. X took his shaft and aligned it with 4's hole. He slowly inserted it in. Halfway in, X stopped. He leaned over and lightly kissed 4. 4 was shaking. Waves of pleasure rushed over him. He was struggling to keep quiet, which was a surprise because he was quite loud in general. X suddenly slammed the rest of his shaft in 4, causing 4 to moan loudly. 4 quickly covered his mouth with his hands once again. X noticed that 4 didn't like to make any noise at all. Yes, X took this into his own hands. X allowed 4 to stretch around him before he smashed his shaft directly at 4's prostate. MNGH4 bit his tongue in another attempt to keep quiet. That didn't work either. X grabbed 4's legs and moved them in a different position before continuing to fuck 4, hitting his prostate harder and harder. "Oh god," MNNH4 quietly said while nodding his tongue out. X was getting close and he was getting faster. 4 began to make unholy noises. He closed his eyes and bit his bottom lip as X continued. He was getting faster. X was getting close. 4 felt his eyes get watery. X. Oh god, XXX. Now that his name came out of his mouth, it was difficult to stop. The pleasure came crashing in. X4 yelled before screeching at the top of his lungs. X squirted his liquid inside 4. It was pure bliss. X panted heavily before letting out a soft mew. X collapsed on 4's stomach. 4 received a cream pie aftermath the day X and 4 hosted literally every single contestant went insane. So many questions and so many people to zap. 4 refused to talk about the many dark violet spots on his neck and jaw. He also refused to talk about his actions last night or the reason why he has a sore throat or why he is refusing to sit down. All the contestants gossiped about the situation and talked about the speech they heard last night. X was called into exit that day. He had no idea why, but all he knew was that the eliminated contestants were moved outside to socialize with the competitors. X walked around the hosting area looking for 4. Quite a beautiful place in autumn. X suddenly stopped at a tree where 4 sat. 4's eyes had a glossy haze. Yep, 4 was currently in exit. X sat down next to his companion and held his hand. X closed his eyes. He thought of 4's destination. Exit, exit, exit. And within a few seconds, X found himself floating down the familiar blue walls. He landed in front of the door of exit. Wait, something wasn't right. X hesitated before opening the door to see 4. 4 sat on the ground in front of his desk facing all the chairs. All the papers were neatly aligned and graded on his desk. He just finished working. 4X said. X walked over and kneeled in front of 4. You called me. Is there anything you need? X asked. 4 nodded. He motioned for X to come closer. X scooted close enough that their legs touched ever so slightly. A blush suddenly formed on his skin. X, we're finally alone again. I've always wanted you. X's eyes widened. I love you. The others' numbers don't matter. X, I need you. I want you. 4 placed his hands on top of X's. X, please multiply with me. Please allow me to make you mine and mine forever. I only want you. At this point, 4 was babbling. His grip tightened on X's hands. You're the only one that makes me feel these amazing feelings. X, please allow me to claim you. 4 finished. He gazed at X with loving eyes filled with lust. He really wanted X. X felt something in his stomach. 4 requested multiplication with him. Out of everyone, 4 wanted him. X suddenly snapped back to reality. His hands were now interwoven with 4's. 4 was still staring at him. He only spaced out for a few seconds. X felt a blush spread across his face. 4. X mumbled. I want to multiply with you. X said. He leaned closer and laid a kiss on 4's lips. 4's lips felt nice. They were slightly chapped, but that made it all the better. 4 suddenly grabbed X's upper arms and pushed him to the floor. X was then met by 4 pecking him on the lips. You know how long I've been waiting for you? 4 asked. I'm sorry 4. I too long? 4 answered himself before cutting anything X could try to say by kissing X again. 4 allowed his tongue inside X's mouth and continued to nibble on the bottom of X's lip. X slowly began to lick 4's lips as he kissed him. He fluttered his eyes closed and wrapped his legs around 4. X was getting heavily aroused. 4 began to slow down the kiss and X followed. 4 cupped his hands on X's cheeks. 4 began grinding on X, rolling his hips as he continued to nibble on X's lips. 4 heard a soft moan emit from X's mouth. X released from the kiss and bit his bottom lip. 4 traced X's lips with his finger and without hesitation X slid 4's index finger into his mouth and began lightly sucking on it. 4 wondered how far this could go. 4 lightly pressed his middle finger on X's lips and once again, X allowed 4's finger into his mouth and sucked on it as well. X wrapped his tongue around 4's fingers and bobbed his head around them, causing 4 to get a bit too excited. 4 removed his fingers and licked them happily before he attacked X's neck. 4. X moaned as 4 began creating hookies on his neck. 4 suddenly stopped. He stared down at X with a mischievous smile. Wait, oh god. 4 wrapped his legs around X and stared at the classroom ceiling. 4 was contemplating whether or not to do something. 4 suddenly then snapped his head down at X, who licked his lips devilishly. 4 rubbed every feature of X from his beautiful tan skin to his soft touch. 4 found himself getting too excited thinking about X without warning. 4 started creating hookies at noticeable places, making sure to show everyone who X belongs to. Him. 4. People are going to notice, X said. 4 nodded with a smile on his face. 4 began to nibble in X's ear, earning a soft moan from him. 4. I'm begging you, do something. 4 nodded before grabbing X by the sides and setting him on his lap. He carefully pulled X's sweater and shirt off. 4 found himself creating small hookies from X's chest to his waist before removing his pants. X noticed that 4 looked a bit concentrated. 4 was making sure to be careful. The co-host was a delicate thing. 4 wanted to make sure X would enjoy every second of this moment. 4 began to take X's black jeans off to be met with something he wouldn't imagine seeing himself. X looked beautiful in 4's eyes. He looked perfect. X's form was adorable. X was curvy yet he was slightly chubby. It's far better than what 4 could imagine. 4 suddenly heard some shuffling. He snapped back to reality to see that X's boxers were gone. X grabbed 4 by his suspenders and slowly positioned himself on the floor. 4's face went incredibly red at the sight of X hickeys all over him. A hint of lust in his eyes. He wanted 4. 4 felt a set of hands slowly removing his jeans and boxers. 4's member popped out and hit his stomach. 4 pressed his shaft against X's clitoris causing X to whimper. 4 picked up X's legs and set them on 4's shoulders. 4 was excited to give X his own creamy treasure. 4 grabbed X's sides causing X to immediately calm down. X began panting. 4 slowly inserted himself inside X. 4 felt X's sides wrapping around him. 4 gave X time to adjust. X nodded before he was met by a wave of pleasure. 4 began pumping himself into X. 4 made sure to go at a fair rate and to be careful. 4. X said softly. X suddenly began bucking his hips incredibly fast. 4 felt saliva dribble from his mouth. X, you're such a good boy. 4 whispered. X gasped. 4 noticed X enjoyed being complimented during multiplication. Without hesitation 4 continued. X, you are so amazing. You are such a beautiful boy. 4 said. 4 felt the tentacles from X's sides wrap around him. 4 began pumping harder and faster. I'm so proud of you, X. Suddenly X let out a loud moan. X's tongue lolled out as tears of pleasure pinpricks his eyes. X was overstimulated. 4 felt something inside X squirt out. It slowly dribbled out of X and onto the teacher's floor. 4 was getting close. X. Dear God, I love you too. 4 began going at an inhumanly rate. X's body began to bounce up and down at 4's every thrust. 4 then let out an ear-piercing screech. He made sure not to direct it at X. 4's liquids slowly filled X's hole. X's stomach grew as 4's liquids went inside of him. X enjoyed the feeling of being claimed. 4 could officially say that X was his and only his. 4 fell asleep on X. X fell asleep on 4, clutching his suspenders. 4 suddenly jolted awake. He looked around. It was Exit. Wait, what happened last night? 4 looked down and saw X. He was sleeping peacefully. 4 then noticed he was still inside X carefully. 4 pulled himself out of X as he was pulling out. His liquids dribbled onto the floor. He heard X squeak before his soft snoring resumed. 4 snapped his fingers and instantly, everything was tidy. X's clothes were on, and 4's clothes were clean. 4 didn't clean X's. He didn't remove the hickeys either. X will enjoy the reactions of the contestants noticing what they did, and the contestants did notice. 4 enjoyed X attempting to hide his love bites. X was bored. He had nothing to do. 4 and X recently finished hosting, so there wasn't anything left to do. X could have made himself something to eat, but he wasn't hungry. He started to consider falling asleep, when the idea popped into his mind that sleeping would probably be nice. He went to look for 4 to let him know. 4X called out. He looked all around where he would usually be, but surprisingly, he was never there. Huh, that's odd. X looked in odd places around where the two would stay until he came to the conclusion that 4 wasn't home. X walked back into his room and flopped on his bed. What now? X wasn't even tired to start. Suddenly an idea came to X's mind. Number. No, definitely not. X's blood rushed to his face. He thought of it. Self-multiplication on 4's bed. X thought of it again. X rubbed his hands on his forearms. Would it really be worth it? X bit his lip. He thought of his companion. 4. He imagined him pulling him closer. He imagined his hot liquids entering him. 4's skinny form pressing against him, making X plead to go faster. He imagined pulling onto 4's suspenders as he got closer. He imagined 4 licking his mess with lust in his eyes, and then continued to softly touch him while whispering sweet nothings into X's ear. X's dirty thoughts soon got to him. He was wet and horny. X's face was flushed with color. He looked at 4's bed. 4 was gone right. It wouldn't be that bad. X walked up to 4's bed and climbed on. His heart was beating heavily. He couldn't have imagined what would happen if 4 found out. X laid his head down and took a breath. He could sense 4's aroma covering the blankets and pillows. X turned his body so his back was facing the pillows. He thought of 4. slowly removing his jeans and boxers. There would be a smile on his face while doing so. His slender body would be towering above XX removed his jeans and boxers quickly in excitement. X circled his finger around his clitoris while putting his hand under his sweater and shirt to touch his area and nipple. X made sure to keep his breathing steady. Carefully, he inserted his finger inside himself. He felt a rush of pleasure. X quickly pulled his shirt and sweater off before he could continue. X was now fully naked on 4's bed. The blankets and pillows cooled X's body down. X pressed another finger in himself and started pumping then deep inside himself. X imagined 4 was there. X added another finger inside himself. 4, please, X whispered. X spread his legs across 4's bed. He imagined 4 was between his legs, telling X how good he was doing. MMNGH. X rolled his hips along with his own movements. He imagined 4 inserting himself inside X, kissing his neck and leaving bite marks around his areolas and claiming X's. 4. X stuttered. X was close but he was so in the moment he couldn't seem to notice what was happening. Saliva escaped from his mouth and made it onto one of 4's pillows. X imagined 4's liquids leaking out of XF4X gasped. X's speed was near inhuman. Something was coming that X didn't notice. Suddenly, X's liquids spurted out of him causing him to groan loudly. X's juice left a large stain on 4's bed. X opened his eyes and gasped. 4's royal blue blankets were now wet. X could see where specifically. X covered his mouth. Dear God! X began to slightly panic. He was still naked. He was a mess and his clothes were sprawled across the floors. Oh God! What have I done? X mumbled. He let his own fantasies get the best of him. He suddenly heard the door rattle. Instead of doing anything, X stayed perfectly still. It didn't really matter what he did at that point. X4 opened the door to be met with X naked, on his bed. 4's cheeks flushed. X sat nervously, waiting for his response to the situation. 4 walked over to X and grabbed him by the wrist. 4 pulled him off his bed and picked him up by his waist. He placed X on his yellow bed and hopped onto the bed as well. 4 was now on top of X. A smile formed on his face. X, you really are a freak, aren't you? X turned his head away in shame. He's never done something so embarrassing. X heard shuffling and looked at 4. 4 pulled his pants and boxers down to reveal his member. X gasped. 4 took his member and shoved it inside X. X moaned in pleasure and pain. 4 slowly began to push himself carefully inside X. X grabbed onto 4's suspenders. 4 connected his lips with X's which soon turned into 4 creating hookies all over X's neck. 4 poked X's G-spot causing X to overstimulate. X grabbed onto 4's shoulders. Then, 4 and X made eye contact. X was a blushing mess while 4 showed nothing but a slight touch of pink on his cheeks. 4 and X kept eye contact. 4 suddenly slammed into X's G-spot. 4X whined. 4 kept eye contact. You look beautiful when you call out my name. X, don't bottle your feelings up. Give me a display. 4 said before slamming himself into XX gasped before becoming a moaning mess. 4. X began bouncing to 4's thrusts, moaning every time. 4's speed continued before 4 started whimpering. He was getting close. X, 4 said before he screamed. XX felt hot creamy liquids pour inside of him. 4 pulled himself out of X before pulling X's naked body close to him. X felt 4's liquids slowly pour out of him. X, you're such a good boy. 4 pulled his co-host closer to him. He wrapped his legs around him before passing out. 4's aroma can be found on X's bed and X's aroma can be found on 4's bed. I wonder why? Okay, now it's your turn. Taco Bottle happily cheered. This was the first party 4 and X has gone to. Only reason why is because it was hosted by Bottle, 4's friend, and he wanted to make sure nothing went wrong for Bottle. 4 decided to let X tag along since he had nothing to do that day. Everyone sitting around the circle watched as the small bottle spun wildly as it soon began to slow down. On Lollipop. What? Taco shouted out of pure shock. Bottle giggled and pulled Taco's soft shell up and grabbed Lollipop's now balled up fists and began to drag them into the medium-sized closet, shove them in, slam the door, and lock it from the outside. Bottle quickly raced to her spot and began to start a timer on a small phone. Everyone began to listen closely. Smack, that was all they had to hear before anyone began to scream. Someone almost tipping over Lollipop's abandoned wine glass. grassy giggle as he began to shriek with the crowd of contestants. Everyone stayed silent the rest of the time. Lollipop and Taco were in the closet, trying to refrain from yelling when they heard anything similar to a kiss. Before the timer could blast its annoying sound, Bottle paused the timer at the last second. Bottle shushed everyone quietly. There was a catch to this game. Everyone had 7 minutes, and when those 7 minutes were over, your time is over. But the catch of this game was that you never knew when 7 minutes was up. You would never hear the timer. Only the listening crowd will know. Bottle tiptoed over to the door, unlocked it and whipped it open. Bottle quickly snapped a picture and slammed the door shut before running back to the contestants and revealing the picture she took. The contestants screamed. 4 and X looked in shock at the phone Bottle was holding. Lollipop had been nibbling in Taco's soft shell, creating little brown hickeys on the shorter girl. Bottle Taco yelled as they ran across the room, tackling Bottle down and swiping her phone from her hands. Lollipop slowly emerged from the closet with an unsurprised face. Lollipop sat back to her spot on the floor and began to drink the wine she recently left. When Taco finally deleted the photo from Bottle's phone, she threw the phone at Bottle and huffed as she walked over to her spot with bath bag. "Who's next?" Bottle asked. Everyone pointed to X, the one sitting to the left of Taco. "Hee, your turn," X Bottle said as she handed the bottle to XO. Maybe you could skip my turn," X said looking at the contestants. "No," Bottle said, giggling. X looked at the bottle and then the contestants. Most of the contestants sat there with impatient faces. Others were chattering about who X might get. "Do it," Bottle shouted. "Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it," the contestants chanted as X sighed. He felt a sudden rush of excitement. X placed the bottle in the middle of the circle, earning a few contestants whistling and whooping. With a flick of his wrist, the bottle began to spin at top speed. Everyone began to quiet down, staring at the bottle. Ford rested his eyes on the bottle, then at his friend, Bottle. Bottle grabbed Ford's shoulders and lightly shook them. Everyone watched as the bottle began to slow down. The contestants began to whisper to themselves and at others. Bottle watched as the bottle in the middle of the room passed clock, then her, then, oh, it stopped. Everyone looked at the person that X will spend his time with. Everyone suddenly let out a gasp, and then they all screamed in excitement. 4 received the bottle. Oh. Everyone screamed as 4 stared at X. X stared right back at 4. 4. "Looks like this one will be interesting," Bottle quipped. Grabbing her friend by the wrist and running towards X, Bottle grabbed X by his hand and ran towards the closet. Everyone began screaming about something having to do with 4 being gentle. X couldn't hear. Suddenly, Bottle threw them both into the closet, slamming the door. X and 4 could hear the door click shut and Bottle's footsteps leaving the area. The only way 4 and X could see clearly was for the little line of light coming from the door sides. "And now we wait," Bottle said. She started the timer. Everyone stayed quiet but they couldn't hear anything going on. Bottle began to giggle nervously at everyone. "It just started. Please just wait. Something will eventually happen," she shouted. Before X could say anything, he was pushed into a corner of the closet, feeling his arms push against the walls. X was met by a monotone stare from 4. X squeaked nervously. X didn't dare to say anything at that moment, but something was wrong. The closet was extremely damp and warm due to the other contestants and their shenanigans, making X feel weirdly aroused. X noticed that the silence was so intense that he could hear 4's soft breathing. X quietly gasped. 4 stared at X. He took his 2 fingers and slowly rubbed it between X's sides, making X open his mouth to say something. 4 slapped his hand on X's mouth. "Do you want this?" 4 whispered, earning a small but noticeable nod from X. 4 picked up X's legs and placed them on his shoulders. 4 continued to let out his tongue and place it on X's clit. 4 tightened his grip on X's mouth as he guided his tongue across X's small hole, carefully inserting his organ inside him. The contestants on the other hand were impatient. Time was nearly up. 4 began sucking X's hole, making sure nobody could hear a thing. X felt a tingling sensation course all over his body. He had to be quiet. 4 removed his tongue from X's body and stared at him. He looked shocked. 4 snapped his fingers. His length appeared out of thin air. He pointed it towards X's hole. Bottle was too worried. She paused the timer and by the time she was at the closet, 4 was inserting himself inside X. Bottle knocked on the door. 4. X. Is everything okay? 4 suddenly had an idea. He gripped X's mouth and held X's hand with his other. We're fine. 4 said. He suddenly shoved himself inside X. A wave of pleasure hit X and he squeaked. 4 removed his hand from X's mouth. X frantically tried to place 4's hand back on his mouth until 4 pumped himself inside X again. X felt small tears form at the sides of his eyes. You sure? Bottle asked. I thought I just heard X squeal. 4 then slammed himself into XF4AHG and X slurred. Bottle went dead silent. So did the murmuring contestants. Bottle quickly motioned for the other contestants to come join her. They all scooted up to her except Blocky and Grassy. Blocky covered his ears and ran into the far corner of the room as Grassy giggled. 4 continued. Now will you open the door? Good. 4 then began pumping himself into X once again. HMNG. X blabbered. X wasn't able to stay quiet any longer. He let out small moans for every time 4 pumped himself in X. X felt his sides push against the walls as 4 continued. 4 pushed one of X's legs to the side and continued, hitting his G-spot at a quicker and better rate. X got louder. 4. Wait. Please seem. 4 saw the want in X's eyes. How could someone be so cute? 4 rolled his hips as he pushed himself farther. X's back was now to the wall. He couldn't contain himself. 4. 4 for please. X clung onto 4's sides. A smile formed on 4's face, exposing all of his sharp teeth. 4 felt his excitement get way past of him. He began biting X's legs and sucking on them and creating large hickeys. 4 glanced at X with half-lidded eyes as he glided his tongue over the love bites he created. 4 gained a strong sensation on pleasure when he saw X's eyes. X was 4's drug. 4 felt X's liquid spill out of him. 4 let out a soft moan all the while getting closer to his climax. X pulled 4 closer and interlaced his hands with 4's, earning a confused look from 4. A blush appeared on 4's face as he noticed what was going on. SPRRT. 4 felt his liquid slowly dribble out of X's hole and onto the closet floor. He looked at his companion and smirked. X's mouth was dribbling wildly. X began to convulse, shaking as he felt the pleasure spread across him. X's eyes were now small blue glotty dots. 4 released himself from X's hole and leaned down, licking the mixed juices from X's sides. He then took X's cheeks and pulled him into a quick peck before he snapped his fingers. The closet door unlocked and anything that had indicated that anything had happened disappeared, this including X's hickeys. 4 then picked up his dazed co-host and opened the now unlocked door to be met with screaming. 4. X Bottle yelled. HM, did you guys guess? 4 then grabbed X's hand and walked out of the large party. He looked at X. He could hear the chaos inside the house.